Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating and frankly kind of highly controversial mission today.
Oh, definitely controversial.
Yeah, we are going to explore this lens on human nature that argues basically almost everything about human behavior. I mean, from our standards of beauty to the massive size of our brains, is driven by this invisible, never-ending evolutionary arms race.
Which is just a wild concept.
Right. So we're unpacking a stack of sources centered around Matt Ridley's 1993 book. It's called The Red Queen: Sex and the Evolution of Human Nature. And to kind of set the stage for how Ridley views the world, there's this incredibly famous scene in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass that perfectly captures the core concept here.
Yeah, the running scene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Alice finds herself running alongside the Red Queen, and they are sprinting, just absolutely breathless, going as fast as humanly possible. But Alice suddenly realizes that, like, the trees and the landscape around them, they aren't actually changing position.
They're just stuck.
Yeah, they aren't actually getting anywhere. So when they finally stop, Alice says that, in her country, if you run very fast for a long time, you usually get somewhere else. And the Red Queen looks at her and says, a slow sort of country. Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place.
I love that. It is a brilliant piece of peculiar children's logic. And what's fascinating here is how it actually became the foundation for a massive paradigm shift in modern evolutionary biology.
Wait, a children's book, quote, became a biological paradigm?
Oh, absolutely. So back in 1973, there was this evolutionary biologist named Lee Van Valen, and he was studying marine fossils, trying to understand extinction patterns, basically.
Yeah.
And he made this deeply puzzling discovery. He found that species actually go extinct at a constant rate, completely regardless of how long they've existed on Earth.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that feels completely backward if you view evolution as like a ladder climbing toward perfection.
Right, which most people did.
Because you would assume that if a species has survived for, I don't know, 10 million years, they must have figured it out. Like, they should be perfectly adapted to their environment and practically immune to extinction, whereas a brand new species would be fragile.
Yeah, that was the prevailing assumption, that species were climbing towards some evolutionary finish line of perfect adaptation. But Van Valen's data proved that the environment is always changing, and more importantly, the biological environment is always changing.
Oh, like other animals.
Exactly. Predators evolve faster legs, so the prey has to evolve faster reflexes. Parasites evolve new ways to breach immune systems, so the hosts have to evolve new chemical defenses. Every single species on the planet is basically Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, wow.
They are running constantly, adapting continuously, just to stay in the exact same place relative to their competitors.
So if evolution isn't a ladder climbing toward perfection, it is more like a giant, never-ending treadmill.
A very exhausting treadmill, yes.
Oh, man, okay. Well, our mission today is to look at how this exact treadmill concept applies to the most intimate, consequential aspect of human life. Because Ridley actually traces this arms race back to one fundamental biological mystery, which is sex.
Yeah. And to understand human nature through Ridley's framework, we first have to grapple with what biologists call the enigma. And the enigma is simply the question of why sexual reproduction exists at all. Because logically,
It shouldn't exist, right?
it really shouldn't.
Because when you look at it purely from an efficiency standpoint, sex makes absolutely no sense. If we are all on this evolutionary treadmill just trying to survive and pass on our genes, sexual reproduction seems wildly counterproductive.
Oh, it's incredibly inefficient. The field actually refers to this as the twofold cost of sex.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So imagine an asexual organism, like a species of lizard, for example, where females just clone themselves. An asexual population can reproduce twice as fast as a sexual one because every single individual in the population can bear offspring.
Right, because there are no males.
Exactly. In a sexual population, males cannot bear offspring, so half the population is essentially dead weight when it comes to direct reproduction. And on top of that, sexual reproduction requires massive amounts of time and energy just to find a mate.
Let alone impress them.
Right. It exposes animals to predators during courtship. It risks the transmission of diseases. By all standard mathematical models of evolution, a cloning population should completely overrun a sexual population in just a few generations.
So the math heavily favors the clones.
Heavily.
But obviously, they don't dominate because almost all complex life on Earth uses sexual reproduction. So there has to be a massive evolutionary advantage that outweighs this twofold cost.
And this is where Ridley champions the Red Queen hypothesis. The answer really comes down to a microscopic, invisible, and ancient war with parasites.
Parasites?
Yeah, bacteria and viruses. Because they evolve incredibly quickly. They have such short lifespans, right? So if a host species reproduces by cloning, every single individual in that species is genetically identical.
They have the exact same immune defenses.
Exactly. They're essentially a sitting duck for a fast-evolving parasite.
Oh, man. Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. So an asexual clone is basically like using the exact same password for every single online account you own.
That is a great way to look at it.
Right. Because it might be highly efficient and convenient for you, but eventually a hacker, which in this biological scenario is the parasite, cracks the password. And when they do, because every single account uses the same lock, your entire life is compromised.
Yep. The parasite can wipe out the entire clone population overnight.
But sexual reproduction is like a two-factor authentication that completely resets the locks and passwords every single generation.
Exactly. Because it mixes genes from two different parents every single generation. The offspring are genetically distinct from their parents.
So the parasites, who spent dozens of generations adapting to attack the specific genetic makeup of the mother, are suddenly faced with an entirely new set of biological locks in the child.
Right. They can't just sweep through the population. They had to start their own evolutionary treadmill all over again. And the sources actually provide some incredible concrete evidence for this mechanism.
Oh, the snail study.
Yes. There was this landmark study conducted on snails in New Zealand by researchers Curtis Lively and Jika Jokela. They looked at a specific species of snail that can actually reproduce both sexually and asexually.
Which is wild on its own.
It is. And they found that in habitats heavily infested with parasitic worms, the sexually reproducing snails thrived. The clones, on the other hand, were highly susceptible to infections.
Because the parasites would just adapt to the most common clone's genetic profile and decimate them.
Exactly. The sexually reproducing snails constantly outwitted the worms because their genetic defenses were always shifting, always presenting a rare or novel target.
So think about that. The fundamental reason you cannot just conveniently clone yourself, the entire biological foundation for romance, courtship, and dating, is this ancient, ongoing war to keep microscopic parasites out of your cells. We are mixing our genes purely to stay one step ahead of the worms.
It forces a complete reframing of how we view the natural world, doesn't it?
It really does. But it also leads to this major visual puzzle. Because if this entire Red Queen arms race is about invisible genetic locks and microscopic immune systems, how does that invisible battle create the highly visible, extravagant, and honestly sometimes absurd physical traits we see in nature?
You're talking about beauty and ornamentation.
Yeah, exactly. Like the classic example that famously gave Charles Darwin a massive headache was the male peacock. I mean, Darwin understood natural selection and survival of the fittest, but the peacock's tail seemed to actively defy that logic.
Oh, completely. Darwin eventually proposed the theory of sexual selection to explain it. Males compete, females choose. But the Red Queen hypothesis takes this further by asking why females choose those specific burdensome traits. Right? Because a male peacock has this massive, heavy, iridescent tail. It requires a huge amount of metabolic energy to grow. It makes flying difficult.
It makes the bird highly visible and incredibly vulnerable to predators like tigers.
Right. From a pure survival standpoint, it is a death sentence.
Wait, so evolution is literally rewarding a creature for handicapping itself. Isn't that totally counterintuitive? Why would survival of the fittest select for something that makes you more likely to get eaten by a tiger?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the solution to that puzzle lies in a concept proposed by biologist Ahmad Zahavi called the handicap principle.
The handicap principle. Okay.
Yeah, Zahavi argued that the handicap is actually the entire point of the display. The female peacock, the peahen, is looking for an honest signal of genetic quality. I mean, in a world full of parasites and predators, how does the female know which male actually has the best immune system and the strongest survival genes?
Right. She can't exactly ask for his medical records. She needs proof.
Exactly. Any male can strut around, but a sickly male, or a male riddled with internal parasites, simply cannot devote the massive metabolic resources required to grow that magnificent tail.
Oh, I see.
Only a male with absolutely incredible genes, immense physical strength, and a pristine immune system can afford to carry around such a ridiculous burden and still manage to outrun the tigers.
Wow. So the tail is an honest signal because it is so costly, you literally cannot fake it. If a low-quality male tried to grow that tail, the biological cost would just kill him.
Precisely. And this introduces the choosy female archetype, which is prevalent across many species. Females generally produce far fewer eggs than males produce sperm, and they often invest heavily in each offspring through pregnancy, incubation, or rearing.
Which means the stakes are way higher for them.
Exactly. Because their reproductive opportunities are limited, they cannot afford to make a bad mating decision. They must look for unmistakable proof of health. As Ridley argues in the book, neither sickly fashion plates nor healthy wallflowers will pass on their genes.
A male has to possess the underlying genetic health to survive the environment and the aesthetic beauty to prove that health to a female.
Right.
So in the broader animal kingdom, males generally display their costly handicaps, and females generally choose based on those honest signals of parasite resistance and genetic vigor. But how does this framework translate to human mating strategies?
Well, that's where things get complicated.
Yeah, because humans don't have massive iridescent tails, and our social structures are vastly more complex than peafowl.
They are. But to understand the evolutionary forces shaping human behavior, Ridley argues we have to look at the original battle of the sexes. And that battle doesn't start in the savanna. It actually starts at the microscopic, genetic level in a phenomenon called intragenomic conflict.
Intergenomic conflict. Okay, we should explain the mechanics of this clearly for the listeners. What exactly is that, and how does it create different sexes?
Okay, so think of a cell as a microscopic ecosystem. If two single-celled organisms fuse together to share their DNA, they both bring their own mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are the power plants of the cell, but crucially, they have their own separate DNA.
Right, they're like little independent engines.
Exactly. So once inside a single shared cell, these two sets of mitochondria start competing. They try to out-replicate each other, fighting over the cell's resources to ensure their specific DNA survives.
Oh, it's a microscopic tragedy of the commons.
Yes, exactly.
It's like a village that shares a single pasture. If every villager selfishly grazes extra cows to maximize their own profit, the grass gets destroyed, the pasture collapses, and everyone starves. If the mitochondria fight over the cell's resources, they destroy the very cell they're trying to power.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The result of that cellular civil war was basically biological mutual assured destruction. So to survive, evolution had to broker a truce. Yeah. When two cells fused, one side had to agree to strip out its mitochondria entirely, acting solely as a delivery vehicle for nuclear DNA. The other cell would provide the main body, the nutrients, and all the mitochondria.
Ah. So one parent provides a massive resource-rich cell, which is the egg, and the other parent provides a tiny, highly mobile, stripped-down delivery system, the sperm.
Yes. That initial division of labor is called anisogamy, and it is the biological origin of the two sexes. And from that single microscopic truce, Ridley argues, cascades an enormous divergence in reproductive strategies.
How so?
Well, because a sperm is so cheap to produce, a male's reproductive potential is theoretically limited only by the number of mates he can find. But because an egg is biologically expensive, a female's reproductive potential is limited by the time and physical resources required to gestate and raise a child.
Okay, I want to jump in here and just be very clear for you listening. We are strictly unpacking Matt Ridley's evolutionary claims here.
Yes, absolutely.
He approaches complex human behaviors entirely through this biological evolutionary lens, arguing that many psychological differences between genders are deeply ingrained evolutionary adaptations rather than arbitrary cultural constructs. I mean, we're just reporting on his theories.
Right. And Ridley's framework suggests that because males can theoretically father many children, they evolved in a high-stakes, winner-takes-all competitive environment. Throughout hominid history, males who took risks and successfully competed against other males for status and territory passed on more genes.
The sources point to some pretty extreme historical examples of this biological drive, don't they?
They do, like the Inca Empire. The Incas maintained a brutally strict mating hierarchy, where a few men at the top had exclusive reproductive access to thousands of women, and any lower status man who violated those rules was actually put to death.
Wow. And Ridley argues this evolutionary pressure shaped modern psychology. He claims that traits often associated with men like higher risk tolerance, aggressive competition, and even an aptitude for spatial rotation tasks evolved because ancestral males needed to navigate vast territories to hunt, fight, and seek out multiple mates.
Conversely, Ridley claims that female nature was shaped by the need to protect their massive biological investment. A female couldn't increase her genetic legacy just by having more partners. She needed to ensure the few children she did have survived to adulthood.
Right.
Therefore, he argues, women evolved to be highly selective, prioritizing mates who demonstrated the ability to provide status, resources, and protection. He suggests traits like superior verbal fluency and complex social intuition evolved because ancestral women needed to build strong, cooperative social alliances to secure resources for their dependent offspring.
It's a very controversial lens, viewing human psychology as the direct result of millions of years of sexual selection, with both sexes playing the Red Queen game, using divergent strategies to maximize their genetic legacy.
Yep.
But wait, this raises a massive question. So what does this all mean? If male nature is supposedly wired for polygamous competition, and female nature is wired for this selective hypergamy, why on earth are humans mostly monogamous? Like, why are we forming pair bonds and living in suburban houses with one spouse? Are we just apes with better real estate?
It is one of the greatest puzzles in evolutionary anthropology
Yeah.
because human monogamy is incredibly rare in the animal kingdom. I mean, if you look at our closest relatives, the great apes, orangutans, gorillas, and chimpanzees all have highly polygamous or promiscuous mating structures.
Yeah.
Out of the apes, only the gibbons are monogamous.
Really? Just the gibbons?
Just the gibbons.
So what forced hominids to adopt the gibbon strategy?
The answer lies in the unique evolutionary constraints of the human brain and the human pelvis. It is known as the obstetrical dilemma.
Oh, right, because we started walking upright.
Exactly. As our ancestors began walking upright, the pelvis narrowed to support bipedal locomotion. At the exact same time in our evolutionary history, our brains were rapidly expanding. To accommodate fitting a large-brained infant through a narrowed birth canal, human babies essentially have to be born prematurely compared to other mammals.
That makes so much sense. Because, like, a newborn foal can stand up and run within hours of being born. But a human infant can't even hold its own head up for months. They are completely helpless.
They are. They require a massive, unprecedented amount of calories, care, and protection for many years before they are self-sufficient. In the harsh environment of early hominids, a mother simply could not provide enough calories to sustain herself and a large-brained infant on her own.
It was just biologically impossible.
Right. A child's chance of survival absolutely plummeted without paternal investment. So a new evolutionary strategy emerged: the pair bond.
Meaning males who abandoned their mates might have fathered more children, but none of those children actually survived. Males who stayed protected their mate and hunted to provide extra protein for their offspring successfully passed on their genes.
And males who guarded their mates ensured that they were actually investing those hard-won resources into their own genetic children. So we evolved this highly unique, delicate system of monogamy and deep paternal investment, even though, Ridley argues, the underlying competitive and selective drives never fully disappeared from our psychology.
So we can see how this evolutionary arms race gave the peacock its extravagant tail, and how the biological realities of raising helpless infants shaped our mating strategies. But Ridley actually takes this treadmill concept and points it directly at humanity's defining future. He applies the Red Queen to our massive, complex, energy-draining brains.
He does. And this brings us to what is arguably Ridley's most controversial thesis in the entire book. He looks at human intelligence and argues that the human brain is simply too big. It far outstrips any basic survival demands that would have been placed on our hominid ancestors on the savanna.
I mean, the brain is a massive energy hog. It makes up only about 2% of our body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of our daily calories just to function.
It's extremely demanding.
From a pure survival standpoint, having a brain this overpowered is almost a metabolic handicap. Wait, a handicap. Are we back to the peacock's tail?
We are exactly back to the peacock's tail. Ridley argues that human intelligence is not primarily a tool for survival. It is a tool for courtship. We are, in his framework, a self-domesticated ape.
But surely we needed high intelligence to survive. We needed to invent fire, craft complex stone tools, coordinate hunting strategies to take down mammoths. You can't do that without a big brain.
You need a capable brain for those things, certainly. But you don't need the capacity to compose a symphony, or understand abstract mathematics, or write poetry, or debate philosophy just to survive.
That's a fair point.
A much smaller, more metabolically efficient brain could have mastered fire and hand axes. Chimpanzees used tools and coordinate hunts without needing the cognitive overhead to invent theater. Ridley argues that the sheer excess of human intelligence requires a different evolutionary explanation.
So, if it wasn't driven by the need to outsmart predators or forage for berries, what drove the rapid expansion of our intellect?
Courtship.
Really?
Yeah. As early hominid females began to prefer mates who were clever, witty, articulate, and inventive. Perhaps because those traits signaled an ability to adapt and provide intelligence became a sexually attractive trait. And once a trait becomes the basis for mate choice, the Red Queen takes over.
The treadmill starts speeding up. It's a cognitive arms race.
Exactly. You have to be smarter and more articulate than the next guy just to get noticed. We selected each other for wit and creativity generation after generation, driving an explosive runaway expansion of the human brain.
Hold on. Are you telling me that someone composing a brilliant piece of music, or an author agonizing over the perfect metaphor in a novel, or even you and I analyzing complex biological theories in this deep dive right now, is fundamentally just engaging in an elaborate mating dance? We are basically just showing off our wit and inventiveness to prove our underlying genetic fitness.
That is the provocative implication of the Red Queen hypothesis. We use our excess intelligence to impress potential mates through humor, creativity, artistry, and intellectual achievement.
That is wild.
We are smart not strictly because we need to be to survive the physical environment, but because our ancestors preferred smart mates. Just like the peahen prefers the biggest, brightest feathers because they signal health, human ancestors preferred the sharpest, most creative minds. It is, at its core, reproductive advertising.
It is a deeply humbling concept. It reduces humanity's absolute greatest achievements, our art, our science, our literature, our humor, to the evolutionary equivalent of a bird doing an intricate little dance in the dirt to get noticed by a female.
It reframes our entire intellectual and cultural history. It suggests that our relentless human drive to invent, to tell compelling stories, to make each other laugh, and to solve complex puzzles is all part of this continuous unconscious effort to prove our quality in the Red Queen's tournament.
It really forces you to take a step back and look at your own behavior in a completely different light. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. What the Red Queen principle really shows us is that evolution isn't some majestic, peaceful march toward a state of perfection. It is a frantic, messy, unending race just to stay in the game.
Just to stay in place.
Right. And according to Matt Ridley's framework, your most intimate desires, your deepest aversions, your appreciation for a good joke, or your specific taste in a partner. None of these are just random cultural quirks or isolated personality traits. They are the echoes of millions of years of survival and reproductive competition echoing through your biology today.
This raises an important question, though, and it's actually one that Ridley himself acknowledges with a healthy dose of humility.
Oh, what's that?
Well, toward the end of the book, he writes, half the ideas in this book are probably wrong.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Evolutionary psychology is a young, highly speculative science, and trying to reverse engineer modern human behavior from the prehistoric pressures of the Pleistocene era is incredibly complex and fraught with assumptions. But think about the mind-bending irony of this. If human intelligence truly is just a cognitive peacock's tail used to show off our wit, our analytical skills, and our charm, then the very act of us debating Ridley's book right now, critiquing his ideas, finding the flaws in his evolutionary logic, and engaging in this sophisticated intellectual breakdown is exactly the kind of intellectual chess game he says we evolved to play.
Oh my God. By trying to tear apart his argument and sound rigorously analytical, we are literally just fanning out our own intellectual feathers. We are proving his point just by having the conversation.
We were doing the mating dance right now.
That is the perfect, slightly dizzying place to leave it for you to chew on today. Whether you are composing a symphony, swiping on a dating app, or just trying to sound remarkably smart at your next dinner party, never forget the grand evolutionary scheme of things. We are all just running as fast as we can just to stay exactly where we are.